Welcome to the deep dive. Now, if you've been keeping track of the conversation around semaglutide, it's often talked about just in terms of weight loss, medical stuff.
Right.
Uh,
The clinical side.
Exactly. But today, we're taking a bit of a different angle. We've got sources like the Dan Hollis Semaglutide Manifesto, entry #1, the day the food craving didn't come, and what Dan Hollis taught me.
Yeah.
And they show, well, a much deeper, more human story. It's not just about the scale.
That's absolutely what we want to dig into. This isn't just, a drug. It's about a really profound shift, I think, in how we understand hunger, even identity, and,
Yeah.
and the role of real support.
Okay.
So our mission today really is to unpack how this tool, semaglutide, interacts with our biology, sure, but also our emotions, our personal stories, the whole human side of it.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that. There's this really common idea, this misconception maybe, that struggling with weight is, well, it's a failure of willpower.
Oh, yeah, you hear that constantly.
All the time. Just try harder.
Yeah.
So how does Dan Hollis, in his manifesto, tackle that? What does he say is actually going on?
Well, it's a really freeing perspective he offers. His main point is crystal clear. Willpower was never the problem.
Wow.
Yeah. He argues that people aren't, lacking discipline. It's more that their biology, their emotions, these ingrained habit loops,
Yeah.
they're often stacked against them.
All right.
So semaglutide, in his framework, it's not some magic bullet. It's a specific tool, a tool that kind of changes how the brain processes hunger, satisfaction, reward. It's a biological nudge, really, that helps level the playing field.
That reframing, just hearing willpower isn't the issue, that must be incredibly validating for people who've carried so much shame around this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It shifts the whole dialogue away from self-blame and towards, well, actual understanding.
Empathy, even.
Okay, so here's where I think it gets really fascinating. Once that biological element shifts, once the cravings quiet down, what happens then? What's the sort of emotional, the psychological impact that Dan talks about? Yeah, he has a really interesting take on this. His core idea is this is emotional weight as much as it is physical weight. He points out that, look, we often eat for reasons that have nothing to do with physical hunger, right? We eat because we're anxious or lonely or bored or maybe overwhelmed or even just feeling like we don't have enough support.
Food as a coping mechanism.
Exactly. Food starts answering questions that aren't really about nutrition.
And Kate's story, from entry #1, the day the food craving didn't come, that really brings this to life, doesn't it? What was her experience like 2 months in?
It's such a powerful account. Kate, she's 46, mother of 3. She was losing weight, yeah. Minimal side effects, the typical stuff. But the biggest change wasn't on the scale. She told Dan, and this is striking, I walked past the pantry, and for the first time in 20 years, nothing reached back.
Wow, just silence.
That absence, that quiet where this constant pull used to be, it was genuinely startling for her. And Dan actually calls this the quiet window. He told Kate, that's the moment where the food stops answering your questions and the real ones start talking.
That silence, though, after maybe decades of noise, I imagine that could be quite unsettling.
It really can be.
Kate even mentioned feeling this unexpected grief of losing the thing that numbed you. Like, even though it was causing problems, she missed that familiar signal, that rhythm, her whole story about herself. She said, everything feels like truth now. It's like the static cleared and suddenly she could actually hear herself, maybe for the first time in a long time.
And what's really interesting is that quiet space, it doesn't just, make things calm. It forces deeper questions to the surface.
The ones food used to drown out.
Precisely. Questions like, what am I hungry for when I'm not hungry? Or who am I without this constant chase? And maybe the biggest one, what's left when the noise goes?
These are huge questions, identity level stuff.
Exactly. The biology quiets down thanks to the semaglutide, and suddenly these fundamental questions become unavoidable.
Okay, so if semaglutide gives people this quiet window, this space, as Dan calls it, clears the runway, what's supposed to happen in that space? What do you do with it? This brings us to his idea of scaffolding, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Dan is very clear on this. His philosophy is semaglutide doesn't fix you. It gives you space to fix yourself.
Right.
He uses this analogy of semaglutide being like good lumber,
Yeah.
Quality material. It makes building something new possible. But if you're ready to actually pick up the hammer and do the work.
It's the opportunity, not the finished house.
Exactly.
And this feels so important because, as Dan points out, your body changes faster than your identity. The weight might come off relatively quickly, But your self-image, those deep habits, the emotional patterns, they don't just vanish overnight. So what is the scaffolding Dan talks about? What does it look like?
Well, it's not just about, cheerleading or pep talks. He's talking about building neurobiological replacement structures.
Okay, neurobiological replacement structures. What does that mean in practice?
It basically means building new habits for your brain and your behavior. Things like new rituals, finding a new rhythm for your days, establishing different routines. These become the new support systems when the drug has changed the chemical environment. He puts it very bluntly. Support isn't optional. It's neurobiological scaffolding. You have to recognize that a biological shift needs a really solid behavioral and emotional structure to actually last.
That makes so much sense, and it ties right into that point from the manifesto about fast weight loss without metabolic pacing is a trap. It's not just about speed.
True.
It's about building sustainable ways of living and, crucially, finding the right pace to integrate all these changes.
And this is key. Dan really stresses that the real work begins after the medication, because semaglutide isn't necessarily forever for everyone. And if you stop taking it, but you haven't built this new internal architecture, those old patterns, those emotional triggers, they can come roaring back.
So you need habits that outlive the injections.
Absolutely. You need strategies for when the tool itself is no longer in play.
So, given all this, if it's about way more than weight loss, how does Dan redefine success? What's the actual win condition here?
It's a really profound shift in thinking. Dan's insight basically changes the goalposts entirely. He says, this journey isn't about eating less, it's about living more.
Living more.
And then he follows up with what I think is maybe his most powerful line. Weight loss is biology. Staying there is narrative.
Wow. Okay. Unpack that. Staying there is narrative.
He explains that people often regain weight not because the drug failed or they failed, but because they never fundamentally rewrote their own story.
Their internal story.
Exactly. They might get that quiet window, but if they don't actively rebuild how they see themselves, how they talk to themselves, they tend to drift back into, as he puts it, confusion, not just simple hunger.
So it's the story you tell yourself about who you are now.
Precisely. If your identity is still the person who struggles with food, just losing weight doesn't fix that narrative unless you consciously write a new one. Something like, I'm someone who listens to my body, or I nourish myself intentionally. It's that internal script that makes the change stick.
That really highlights the core of Dan Hollis's approach, doesn't it? That compassion you see in the manifesto. There is no shame here, only process.
Yeah.
For anyone who's felt that deep gnawing blame, that must feel like permission to breathe. He's saying you are not broken, you're not lazy, you're not undisciplined.
Exactly. He's saying you're essentially working against biology you didn't understand and maybe a culture that benefits from keeping you confused.
And that empathy, that's why he frames it as a conversation, not a prescription.
It's not just about following rules. It's about building a healthier relationship with food, yes, but also with your own body. And importantly, with the people guiding you through it. He basically says you're not starting over. You're starting right. Meaning, this time, you have tools that actually work with your body and brain, not against them. And that alignment, that's where sustainable change comes from.
I love how he positions himself as a guide, too. Not the expert shouting advice from the front, but someone walking alongside asking better questions. Like, what if the weight wasn't just physical, but historical, emotional, familial? That's deep.
It is.
Or that beautiful framing, what if semaglutide is less of a prescription and more of a pause button? That just changes how you see the whole thing.
It really does.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it feels really clear that semaglutide, when you look at it through Dan Hollis's eyes, it's much more than a drug. It's like this profound pause button, a quiet window that opens up this deeper human journey, a chance for real self-discovery, for rebuilding.
And it leaves us, and you listening, with a really potent question to sit with, I think. What happens when that external support, the tool like semaglutide, eventually fades? You're left with a changed body, yes, but also this wide open canvas.
On a blank page.
Exactly, a blank page for a new story of who you are, beyond just hunger. And the real challenge, but also the incredible opportunity, is stepping up to be the author of that new narrative, day by day.
So maybe the invitation here is to reflect on what new architecture, those new rituals, rhythms, routines you might want to build in your own life, not just to lose something, but to gain something much bigger, a new story, a truer self. Thank you for diving deep with us today.